You know the iconic LeBron James celebration, the silencer, where James emphatically beats his chest and forcefully pushes his hands down to the floor over raised knees after getting a clutch bucket? Well, that's the same celebration I couldn't help but do myself in my work cubicle a few weeks ago when I learned that our guest today, Judge Thomas Griffith, had agreed to an interview on the podcast. Judge Griffith is a retired judge who spent 15 years of his career working on the Washington, D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, what's often known as the second highest court in the land. That'd be the second highest court behind only the Supreme Court of the United States. Put another way, this court is kind of like a AAA baseball team filled with all of baseball's top prospects. For some additional context, when Judge Griffith retired a few years ago, his retirement ceremony was attended by 5 sitting Supreme Court justices. Throughout his career prior to his retirement as a judge, Brother Griffith worked as a seminary teacher, the Senate Legal Counsel of the United States, what's known as the Chief Legal Officer of the United States Senate, and as an assistant to the President and General Counsel of BYU. Today, he still resides in the D.C., Virginia area, but travels to Boston often to teach a class at Harvard Law School. My friend Nick, an attorney living in Washington, D.C., joins me to talk with Brother Griffith about his mission to Southern Africa from 1973 to 1975. Brother Griffith is a master storyteller who, in this episode, shares stories about his conversion to the gospel as a 16-year-old, living and working in Apartheid, South Africa during his mission, the importance of teaching complex topics simply, and a lot more. All this coming up next.
So that's a Holbein portrait of Erasmus, 16th century Christian humanist, Catholic. This is Holbein's portrait of Thomas More, 16th century Christian humanist. They were good friends and had this really interesting correspondence. Of course, Thomas More became a Catholic saint. He was beheaded by Henry VIII. These guys were resisting Luther and the Reformation. They recognized there needed to be change in the church, and they were humanists in the sense that they engaged in classical learning. They wanted to reform the church by having a focus on scripture. You know, I don't want to get carried away here, but they're pretty inspiring. They're faithful and committed to the church, and they recognized the church needed to get a lot better, and they wanted to help it. Do you know Brian Koschiznik, the Latter-day Saint painter?
I don't know.
Oh, come on. Go look him up. You need to look him up. He's like the most important living Latter-day Saint painter. This is an awesome painting. You can't tell from there. It's called Divine Intervention. And right there is a guy studying. And up here is this group of angels. And one of the angels is reaching out to help him, but the lead angel is holding him back, like saying, oh, come on. No. He can get it.
Interesting.
Make it work for it.
Yeah, that's
All
awesome.
right.
You're a big sports fan?
Yeah.
Did you ever see on Twitter, there's an account that's called Art But Make It Sports? Have you seen that one?
No. Tell me about it.
Oh, they'll take like a shot of the day, somebody scoring the winning touchdown, outstretched, lunging for the end zone. And he's this guy, he's just like a total art connoisseur. He knows so much art, and he'll match it with a famous picture from art history. He's so good. It's really hilarious to see.
What's it called? I got to look it up.
I think the handle is Art But Make It Sports.
Art But Make It. I'll find.
It's really funny, and he's so good. People thought he was using reverse AI or something to search it, and he just knows art like the back of his hand.
Oh,
that's pretty amazing.
That's fun. So you got any Apuka?
Apuka? I don't even know art well enough to engage.
No, but I mean Puka Nakua. You gotta.
Oh, any of Puka. Yeah, the Puka. Yeah, I'm sure he does, actually.
Is this guy a Latter-day Saint? He's doing this?
No, he's not. Just whatever's salient in the sports world, he'll match
fun.
with an work of art. But
I was just going to say, I actually just recently watched A Man for All Seasons, which is on Thomas More. Yeah, like a couple weeks ago. But anyway, that was very insightful, what you said, to hear about kind of how he challenged the church back then and whatnot.
I am so impressed. What led you to watch it?
It was actually a coworker at my nonprofit law firm that I work at. He wanted to have like a movie night felt like it was, legally related. And so that's what we decided to watch.
I'm pretty certain that I haven't said anything in a public setting, lecture, speech, or something that doesn't somewhere refer to Man for All Seasons. I teach a class at Harvard Law School. By the way, I couldn't get into Harvard as a student, but now I'm teaching there, which is just rich. And with the first 2 days, we watch the movie and then we talk about it. It's the best.
So funny. So are you home in Washington area or are you up in Boston?
No, I don't have a home in Boston. I go up there to teach just for a couple of weeks in January. We live about an hour outside of DC, a little over an hour outside DC in the Virginia countryside.
Okay, so what I'm going to do, Judge Brother Griffiths, I'll call you Brother Griffith, Your Honor.
Judge Griffith couldn't make it, but Tom Griffith could. So,
Okay, great. What I like to do is get a little bit of background of your secular life, and then we'll go into the mission, which is really the main focus of what we're talking about. So really, one of the first questions just secularly that I wanted to ask is, at what point did you know you wanted to go into the legal field and then from that point become a judge?
yeah. So I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area, got deep roots here. I've always been interested in national politics. As a high school kid, I worked on Capitol Hill as an intern for Congressman Morris Udall, a Democrat from Arizona. And so I just had the Potomac fever.
You didn't stand a chance.
So all the people that I looked up to and admired, not all of them, but many of them were lawyers. And so there was always in the back of my mind that, oh, this is something you can do to help participate in that national discussion. So that was always in the back of my mind. So my mission persuaded me not to do that. And so I came off my mission and I was set on becoming a seminary and institute instructor. So I pursued that. And actually, that was my first career. I was hired by the church educational system, did seminaries and institutes, ran the programs in the Baltimore, Maryland area for 3 years and just loved that. I loved that. Was just the people I worked with and things to do. I just loved it. But I had a feeling that maybe I shouldn't do that the rest of my life. And so I went to law school and decided to pursue that. The judge thing, I never had any idea of being a judge. Look, I like the law. I don't love it. I mean, I'm not one of those people that when I have spare time, what I do is read law. There are people like that. I endured law school. One of the happiest days of my life was the day I graduated. I like it a lot. I'm very interested in it, but I don't love it. So I really never thought, oh, gee, I'd really like to be a judge. But through a series of strange incidents and coincidences, I ended up being the chief lawyer for the United States Senate for 4 years. And when I finished that, I was back at my law firm where I was a partner, prepared to do that the rest of my life, when an influential friend called up and said, hey, have you ever thought about being a judge? Because you're in kind of a unique position. You're a conservative who has got friends who are Democratic senators. And that's very attractive to.
Easy confirmation.
Yeah,
huh?
exactly. So somebody proposed it. I went and talked to some friends who were judges and I thought, okay, yeah, maybe this would be really, really interesting. So I allowed, I don't want to say that it was forced upon me, but it wasn't my idea. But when somebody presented to me, I thought, oh, this would be cool. So I sort of, threw my hat in the ring, so to speak.
Interesting. And so what would you say your favorite part of your career as a judge, what if you had to distill it down to, a thing or two, what would be your favorite part?
Oh, that's actually quite easy for me. And I think it's true for most. Look, being on the DC circuit was just, I mean, I felt like Forrest Gump. I just had to pinch myself all the time by what am I doing here with these really cool people talking about these really consequential issues. I just felt so fortunate to be there. So being with my colleagues who were just spectacular jurists and even better people dealing with I really like the docket of the DC circuit, administrative law that actually interests me a lot. Those were all great, but they don't come close to the greatest part of the job. And that's the relationships you form and the work you do with your law clerks. That's for me. And I think it's true for many. That's the greatest part of it. You're working at close quarters with these really bright, ambitious, good young people who want to serve the country, who love their country, and working in close quarters with them for a year and then keeping in touch with them after that to help them in any way you can as they progress through life and their careers. That's clearly the best part of the job.
Yeah. So is it's a pretty rigorous process, just, going through and just selecting clerks, right? Is that walk through the process of that a little bit?
The first day that my clerks were in my chambers, the judge's office is called his chambers. First day they were in chambers, I sat them down. I said, look, you're going to get to know me better than anyone outside my family. Okay. You're going to see me up close and personal, warts and all. So I'll tell you right off the bat, I could not have clerked on the DC circuit. Okay. And, I did okay in law school. I was fine, but I didn't do well enough that I would be competitive for a job on the DC circuit. Now, these young people are some of the finest students at finest law schools in the country. And it's hyper, hyper competitive. And so we would get the very best and brightest from the best law schools and invite them to come work with us for a year. And that was largely done. They apply through a normal process, but it's largely done based on recommendations of law professors you have relationships with at these law schools, whose judgment you trust. And when Professor X calls me up and says, Judge, I've got this wonderful student. I know Professor X, I trust her. That gave a lot of weight to those sorts of recommendations.
Mm. A good word goes a long way, huh?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hmm. Okay, interesting. Nick, did you have any specific law questions? I was going to turn over to you as our attorney in residence here.
Yeah, I don't know if it's that law based, but I thought it was interesting that you brought up relationships and how important those were in the law world. I am pretty new, as I said earlier, but it seems like in law school and then even after, everything seems to be centered socially around alcohol. And I'm just wondering how it was for you to navigate that scene. Because for me, not drinking, sometimes people stop inviting me out to, go out and happy hour or whatever, because they know I don't drink. So I'm just wondering, like, how was it for you to kind of navigate the networking and building these
Sure.
relationships?
Well, in law school, so I was not a traditional law student. I was a little older, married and 4 kids. And so not that I tried to hide my commitment as a Latter-day Saint. I didn't, but I don't think I could have if I wanted to. It was all over the place, BYU, church educational system, married, 4 kids.
You were branded.
Yeah, no. So
Yeah.
I not that I wanted to avoid that, but if I had wanted to avoid it, I don't know how I could have. So right from the outset, I was branded. That's the word. And so no, I never got invited to happy hour. No, I didn't want to go. No one asked me, and I really wasn't that deeply involved in the social life of my class. I mean, I formed several really close friendships, but my situation was so strange. I really just didn't have time to socialize. I was in a much different place than most people are in law school, so that's not a good measure. Now, in law firms, again, maybe I'm naive, but as I look back over my life, I think people treated me better than they probably should have when they found out that I was a Latter-day Saint, was all in. I think they made some assumptions that I was glad for them to assume, and it was something for me to aspire to. But I never got the sense that it was a liability at all. Now, maybe I'm missing it. Maybe behind my back, they were saying all sorts of things, but I never got that sense. I'd go to firm retreats and firm dinners and stuff. I always had a ginger ale in my hand or an orange juice. And I never got the sense that that was looked down upon at all. In fact, I really think I got bonus points for that.
Mm,
So I don't know. Maybe my experience isn't representative.
right. No, I remember reading up on your bio about when you were appointed and how it was kind of trying to get like nonpartisan support from everybody. And it seemed like I saw a couple quotes from the Washington Post about how people from both sides felt like you were a man of integrity and a man who stuck to his word. And I probably would attribute that to, like you said, that image that you fostered throughout all the years. So,
And I'm the beneficiary of that. It's not like I created that. I mean, in
mm,
Washington, D.C., at least in the legal circles where I found myself, I was the beneficiary of others who had set great examples. And so really amongst the people that I associated with, when they thought Latter-day Saint, they thought something really good. A lot of that comes because of Rex Lee, the former BYU president. He was the Solicitor General of the United States, which is like the coolest lawyer's job in the world. And he was so well regarded because
Mm.
first, he was a great lawyer. Second, just a great human being. And so when people found out that I had even the most tangential connection to Rex Lee, they immediately thought better of me. And that's been my experience in the Washington legal community, that you're always going to get people who haven't had experience with Latter-day Saints. And so therefore they may, fall prey to some stereotypes. But at least the people that I ended up working with and among didn't have those stereotypes. As a matter of fact, the stereotype they had was one that I aspired to be like, hardworking, friendly, open, these sorts of things. So, there's an important book that was published over a decade or so ago called American Grace by Robert Putnam at Harvard, and its co-author was David Campbell. And I think it's the most comprehensive study of the state of American religion that's ever been done. And they did a lot of surveys of what the American people think of various religious groups. And unfortunately, Latter-day Saints are way down. We're down with Muslims, and we've been there. Catholics in the 1960s were down there as well. Now they're up in the 90% range. We're still underwater. We're like at 50% approval rate until they survey somebody who knows the Latter-day Saint. And amongst that group, we're up there, 90% or so, which is a nice little, that's been my experience. I work among people who had been with Latter-day Saints and they thought better of them. But people who haven't been amongst Latter-day Saints, it's true for all of us. It's easy to fall into stereotypes. I'm certain I do that with all sorts of people who I don't know. I'm certain I have stereotypes about groups that I haven't had much interaction with. And as it turns out, when you finally interact with others, you find out, oh, they're really good people. So, and that's actually a lesson from the mission, right? I mean, you learn that on your mission. Very much so.
For sure you do. Yeah, so we probably should get into that. I feel like I could talk to you about your career and your life for a long time, but since we're doing mission stuff, we'll get into that.
That's only because I'm old. So,
Well, you've had so many interesting experiences and met so many interesting people that it's fun to pick your brain on those. But I really am curious to hear about your mission stuff. So you are a convert to the church, and there's plenty of interviews. You've talked about that, so people can go listen to those if they want to. But do you have any specific memories with the missionaries teaching you as you were becoming a convert, or what do you remember of that?
yeah, no, I have distinct memories of that. I was 16 years old at the time, and I had a great set of missionaries, Elder Thompson and Elder DeWall, and they were fabulous. This is the old days of the flannel board. You guys probably don't even know that. They
Yeah.
set the flannel board and put little figures on it, which seemed kind of childish, but it was actually quite effective. I had great memories. They were wonderful people, and yeah, I was pretty easy for them. I had had some profound experiences that led me to have those discussions. So I think I was pretty easy for them. It didn't pose great obstacles for them.
So that was 17, right, when you
16,
officially
was 16,
joined the church?
16 years old.
16. So right away you thought, okay, yeah, like you were bought in. You knew I'm joined the church, and now I'm going to depart on a mission when
Yeah,
I'm
no,
19, or
I wanted to be like them. I mean, I so admired them. I thought, how cool would this be to be able to do what they do and be like them? Yeah. So from the get-go, I was hoping that I'd be able to do that. Unfortunately, I had parents who, although not members of the church, were very supportive of me doing that. So
yeah, that's pretty amazing. That goes a long way, doesn't it, to have them give you license to do
yeah,
what you believe, instead of trying to be a barrier or whatever.
I was prepared to, support myself financially if need be. They wanted to do it. So that was pretty remarkable.
Yeah, it is. So you were on board, you wanted to go on a mission, you got your call. The call was not to South Africa, it was to Southern Africa, is that correct?
It was the Johannesburg, South Africa mission, but it included the Republic of South Africa, the country of South Africa, and a country that was then known as Rhodesia, now known as Zimbabwe. So that's Southern Africa. Not all of Southern Africa, though. It's just those two countries.
So receiving the call to go there, I mean, total other side of the world.
Yeah, it blew my mind. I was born in Japan. My father was in the U.S. military up to the Korean War, and he and my mom were stationed in the port of Yokohama. So I was born in Japan. And so I just thought, okay, somebody in Salt Lake is going to see that, and I'm going to go to Japan, which would have been fine. Although I was a little nervous. That's a tough language to learn, and so I just kind of assumed that I was going to go to Japan. And my bishop, who had served the mission in France, was just confident that I was going to be going to France. Hey, Dad, no, you're going to France. I'd had, 6 or 7 years of schooling in French. I really wanted to go to the States. I was really hoping for an English speaking mission because I was afraid of the barrier that language would pose. I didn't want that to get in the way. I had given no thought that I might be sent to the home of Nelson Mandela. That was pretty remarkable.
Yeah. What years were you there?
From 1973 to 1975.
Okay, so pretty interesting time
Yeah, yeah,
in history
not a
then.
happy time for South Africa. And there was a war going on in Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe at the time, and tense time. Mandela was in Robben Island. He was in jail. This was the nadir of apartheid. And so
Yeah.
it was tough time for the country.
So with the apartheid beginning then as a missionary, did you see that kind of thing in the
Oh,
day-to-day life? Were
oh
you
no, yeah, yeah.
impacted
The
by that?
central organizing principle of the government in South Africa at the time was race. I mean, they organized things completely along the lines of race. So no, you saw it everywhere. There was strict segregation. People of color, of African descent, could not live in European or white areas, and vice versa. So no, you couldn't miss it. It was like Jim Crow in the United States in many ways. You'd go to a post office and there would be a sign that for coloreds was the phrase, coloreds only, whites only.
Mm,
It was like, no, it was like being in Georgia in 1855 sort of thing.
yeah.
It's pretty.
So your modern Western sensibilities screamed at you, right?
They did. They did. I also recognized that I was there to do something different. I was there to preach the gospel of Christ to people that I was allowed to see. And so this wasn't the time to, be a revolutionary in that sense. Time to be a different sort of revolutionary. But at the end of my mission, I had a remarkable experience where we were able to teach a woman of color. And the phrase colored is not a pejorative in South Africa. It's describing mixed race folks and descendants of the original Aboriginal folks there. But I was able to participate in the teaching of a colored woman who joined the church right at the end of my mission. And it was a remarkable experience. And I had one little anecdote from that. She was not literate. Her name was Ella Bainkies. She was not literate. She came to work as a domestic helper in the mission home and very much wanted to join the church. And my mission president allowed my companion and I to teach her. So that's a bit of a challenge, right? She can't read. We had all these pamphlets and books and stuff, you have to read. So we asked the cook in the mission home, a wonderful woman named Dorothea Story. She was a European white woman. If she would read to Ella, this person of color. Now, there was nothing in Sister Story's background or experience that would ever have her sitting down next to a colored as an equal and reading from scripture. But she loved the missionaries and we asked her to do it and she did it. So I have this image of one night walking down the hallway and passing by Sister Story's room. And it was one of these old mission homes, big places. And I passed by Sister Story's room and the door was open. And there on the bed, the foot of the bed, was Sister Story, this proud white woman reading from the Book of Mormon to Ella Bainkies, this colored woman. Their society had tried to keep them apart, but the gospel of Jesus Christ is what brought them together. And that was right as I was leaving my mission. And I realized, okay, well, the gospel of Jesus Christ is the hope for all of us, for every nation, kindred, tongue, and people. The special hope for this wonderful land of South Africa that's been so divided along the lines of race. And that was a powerful experience and gave me a sense of just what the gospel could. Gospel is about a whole lot more than not drinking coffee. It's about a whole lot more than that. And it's about seeing what I saw that evening between Dorothea's Story and Ella Bainkies. It's about bringing people together across these constructs that humans have created, these false divisions based on, race and ethnicity and nationality and ideology and gender. These are constructs that we use to divide us, but the gospel of Jesus Christ is the most powerful force to bring us at one across those divides.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's very similar message to the story that you've told that I listened to it when you spoke to Terrell Givens about it. but being on the bus in Durban, if you
Yeah.
recall that
Yeah.
story, if you would tell that one as well.
Yeah, sure. So I'd been on my mission 4, 5, 6 months or so. And, I loved being a missionary. I was diligent, I tried to think of new ways to get people interested. We spent most of our time in those days knocking on doors in neighborhoods, trying to get people interested and always thinking of new door approaches, and not having a great deal of success with that. But one day was our preparation day and we were taking the bus to the chapel where they had in Durban in South Africa, they had a squash court in the chapel. How cool is that? But so we were going to go play
Yeah.
squash. That obviously was not approved by, church headquarters sort of thing, but we were going to go play squash.
Nowadays, they've just got the pickleball. Nowadays, they've got the pickleball courts in
We're going to
there.
do a pickleball court. As it. So we were on our way there and we were on this bus and the bus went through downtown Durban in the middle of the day. Durban's a large city, large urban city. And the bus got stuck. I can't remember the reason for it. It might have just been traffic, but we were stuck there right near the center of Durban. And as I recall, there was a large town square that we were by. And I remember looking out over this town square and it just really hitting me. Oh my gosh, you're in South Africa. I mean, you're halfway around the world because you look out over this plaza and there were people dressed in African garb. Durban is on the Indian Ocean. So you have a lot of folks from South Asia there. You got the smell of curry. Then you've got the white European population. So it's just all these folks mixed together. And it was kind of like, every nation, kindred, tongue, and people right before you, just right there. And I'm not a mystic. I'm an evidence-based skeptic, but I had a mystical experience because I was looking out over this. I had this really strong impression that came to me that Elder Griffith, every person you see out there is hurting. They hurt for one reason or another. As a minister of the Lord Jesus Christ is to help them with that pain. And that's what you've got. You're not there to teach them a set of propositions about the nature of God. That's part of it. No, that's not the real message. The real message is their love. The Lord died for them. The Lord lives for them. He wants to help all of us deal with this pain from wherever it comes from family relationships, from societal structures, whatever. We all have it. And that's your job. That changed my mission. It changed my approach. And I tried to keep in mind on my mission that every person I was dealing with pain. And that seemed right because I knew I was, right? I knew that described me. That seemed right that it described others. And so I think that's true. And I've tried to, throughout my life, I'm certain I haven't done this any close to the level I need to, but I try to remember that every person that I deal with, we've all got pain. And most of us are doing a pretty good job of hiding it. And some of us are honest enough that we don't try and hide it. And that makes the rest of us feel really uncomfortable, but that's good. That's good. And so I've tried to keep that in mind when, administering a program or teaching a lesson that we all hurt. We need a healer. And we need a healer.
Yeah.
And that's Christ's primary role, is our healer.
I had a similar experience. It was a little bit simpler, but I remember early on in my mission being in the primary room. We were playing the piano, I think, for the primary kids to sing. And I was just still brand new. Everything felt so different. The food, the traffic, everything's so different. And there was a moment where I remember looking at some of the kids in the primary room and, kids picking his nose. He's picking his friend's nose. Like they're teasing, they're doing kid stuff. And it hit me and I thought, holy cow, they're the same. Like what I'm watching is the exact same as I would watch in an American primary.
Yeah.
And it's like, we're all the same. We're not so different. We want the same things. And I think that stuck with me too, where I think there really is a universal kind of want and a universal need. And luckily, the gospel is there to fill that. So
I'm sorry, where did you
it's very
serve?
interesting.
Where did you serve your mission?
I served in Cambodia.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So interesting. Well, let's see. There was another question I wanted to ask. You also mentioned your mission president. You said you really adored him. So briefly tell us about the relationship you had with him and why it was special.
Yeah. I just assumed everyone had a mission president who they could just worship. And it turns out that's not the case, but many of us did. And I did. I was fortunate. I had a man, Robert Thorne, who just was filled with love for his missionaries. And you could just feel it. The first time that I felt that was, so you spent 2 months in called the language training mission then. It's now the missionary training center, learning Afrikaans in Provo, and then flew to South Africa and then spent a couple of days at the mission home in Johannesburg with the mission president, where he did some training, some orientation, and then he'd interview us. And then after that, we got our assignments for where our first area would be. And so I spent, like 2 days with President Thor. There were 9 of us in our group. Spent 2 days with him. And that's when I first detected this. Oh my gosh, this guy is just filled with love. The place where it really hit me was he's interviewing me for the first time. And he knows a lot about me. He's got the file, that's got all this information about my background. So we're having this interview, and it's, and he's asking about me and my interests and stuff like that. And at the end of the interview, he was behind the desk, and he came out from behind the desk, and he came up to me and he put his arm around me. Now, I'm not a hugger. Okay. I'm getting better, but I'm not a hugger. You do the Ancestry 23 DNA stuff. Like, I'm 99.9% British Isles. Like, I am so boring. There's no Ashkenazi Jew, which I was really hoping for. No West African. I am just like, I'm the whitest person it's really, really disappointing. But anyway, and I've got all this British DNA in me, so I'm not a hugger. And yet he comes around and he puts his arm around me. It brings me right up to him. And I'm feeling really uncomfortable because he's hugging me, right? And he's looking into my eye and he says, Elder Griffith, I love you. And man, I felt it. I just felt it in my heart. And he said, can we pray together? And of course, no, President, we can't pray together. Yeah, we can. He said, let's kneel together. And he said, and if it's all right with you, I would like to put my arm around you when we pray. Well, again, I'm not going to say no, but I'm feeling the idea of this is just this is really way outside my comfort zone. And yet I felt it, and I felt his love. And I thought, this man cares for me. He loves me. I will do anything that I can to help him. And it just continued that way. He called me to be his assistant. And so I spent the last 6 or 7 months of my mission as his assistant, and he used us always. I mean, he brought us into everything. And I learned so much. I'd been a member of the church, like 2 years or so. I had a great bishop when I joined the church, Earl Boucher, great stake president, Julian Lowe. These are giants of people. But for me, what's there icing on the cake? I don't know. And finishing the foundation, you pick your metaphor, was the time I spent my mission president, Bob Thorne. And it's interesting now as an old man, when I get to have some interaction with some of the senior leaders of the church. And one of the questions, I don't think like the question they ask is, well, who was your mission president? And when I say Bob Thorne, people know. And so we kept in touch throughout his life. I mean, there weren't too many months that would go by that he would call. It wasn't just me. He'd do this for everyone. And he's the type of guy that he's calling me, I'm on the phone, we'll talk for 45 minutes. And at the end of the 45 minutes, he's got to go. And I realize it's been all about me. He hasn't told me anything about him. He's just been asking me about me. So anyway.
A lifelong friendship there.
Yeah.
So I want to be respectful of your time. One other story I wanted you to tell was your story about Rex Lee and teaching complex topics simply, because you've told that before and I remembered it. And there's some really actually important, I think, mission principles that are easily teased out of that. So,
yeah. So Rex Lee, many people would argue the greatest, or certainly one of the greatest lawyers to argue before the Supreme Court, widely respected in the Washington legal community and by justices of the Supreme Court. Is just considered one of the great advocates. I knew him because he lived in McLean, Virginia, where my parents lived, and I would visit my parents and attend the ward there and got to know him a little bit, not real well, but a little bit. He invited me to be his guest. When I was in law school, he invited me to be his guest in an argument with the Supreme Court. Like, yeah, that's pretty cool. And so So I went as his guest. I'd never been in any courtroom before. Here, I'm in the Supreme Court, which is a really impressive setting. And I'm going to see the great Rex Lee argue. He went second. His opponent got up and spoke first. I can't remember what the case was about. This was so long ago. But I remember the first lawyer was a law school professor representing a client in some matter. And this professor started, and oh my gosh, this professor is brilliant. I mean, erudite, articulate, eloquent. Yeah, I just thought, wow, these folks are really good. And one reason I knew that this professor was such a good advocate was because I couldn't understand anything he was saying. But that's like all my law school. That was law school for me for 3 years. Really brilliant people. I knew, wow, these people are really smart. I mean, you don't know what they're saying, but man, are they smart. And so they finished, and then Rex Lee gets up. And I'm really excited to hear this. Wow, the bar's been set pretty high by your opponent. Let's see how Rex does here. And he begins, he launches into his argument. He had a bit of a stutter that when he got nervous, and even though he argued in front of the Supreme Court, dozens of times, you could tell he's a little nervous. So he started off with a little bit of a stutter, and I thought, oh, that's okay. But then he got over the stutter, and then he launched into his argument. And as he began his argument, in the first couple of minutes, my heart sank. I couldn't believe it. I was so embarrassed for him. It seemed to me more like he was talking to a youth Sunday school class than he was talking to the Supreme Court of the United States, because I could understand everything he was saying. Even though I hadn't read the briefs and stuff, I could understand everything he was saying. And I was so embarrassed for him that it was so pedestrian, that it was so simple. Well, yeah, obviously the point is that's why he was so great, right? It was because he could take really complex ideas and he'd thought about them long and hard enough that he could make them very simple. And I appreciated that, hopefully throughout my career. I never appreciated that more than when I was a judge myself and got the robe and sitting on the other side of the bench. And what you realize is you don't know this case nearly as well as the lawyers. They've lived with it for years. You've been with it for a couple of weeks and maybe a couple of days, maybe a couple of hours, and what you appreciate most is people who can take complex ideas and make them simple. And so I developed a theory. I never tested it with Brother Lee before he passed away, but I developed a theory that one reason Rex Lee was such a great advocate was because he had children that he read to, and he served in the church where he had to teach people things simply. So my advice to young law students who want to become great advocates is the same. I say, the most important thing you can do is if you have children, teach them, read to them, help them understand complex ideas. If you don't have children, go to your pastor or your priest or your rabbi and say, I want to teach the 10-year-olds. Okay. That's where I want to be. I want to be in there and take complex ideas and explain them to folks simply. If you're not a believer, then go volunteer at the local library. But you need to be around children so that you can learn the skill. And it's really a difficult skill, taking complex ideas and explaining them simply. Rex Lee did that. I'm guessing an important part of his life to help him develop the skills was that he was a missionary and he taught in the primary and he taught in the young men and young women's program. And he had kids that he talked to a lot.
Yeah, I think it's one of the coolest stories because you're teaching on a mission, right? You're teaching the most complex, potentially the most complex things you could talk about. And you're trying to distill it into something very simple to somebody who's never heard it or understood it. And what a valuable skill that you can, come away with that hard to kind of get otherwise as a 19-year-old kid. So I always loved that story. Okay, I know you've got to go. If I can, just one final question. I was going to ask, how has your testimony changed since you returned from your mission? And what would be your counsel to a returned missionary who's feeling disaffected or is now harboring doubts about the things they once testified of? That's just a quick final question for you, huh?
Fine with this. So here's my quick stab at it. We need to cultivate the spiritual habits. We need to keep up the spiritual habits that hopefully we formed on our mission. And that's meaningful prayer, not the checklist form of prayer, but meaningful prayer on a constant basis. I have a quote up here from C.S. Lewis in the movie Shadowlands. I pray because I can't help myself. I pray because I'm helpless. I pray because the need flows out of me all the time, waking and sleeping. It doesn't change God. It changes me. So that's the first thing I'd say is just cultivate a deep prayer life. Be the type of person that prayer, like we sing in the song, prayer is, Christian's native breath. So I think that's the first thing I'd say. Second thing I'd say is make the sacrament of the Lord's Supper the central event of your life. But build your life around preparing for, taking the sacrament, and then reflecting upon it. Make that the most important thing you do every week. Not just as a, 10-minute, 15-minute interruption to your Sunday activities. No, make the sacrament of the Lord's Supper the central aspect of your life. Next to last, when you go to church, stop thinking about going to church so that you can be fed. No, that's for primary kids and youth, and it's good. We're good at that. No, where you are right now, no, you're there to feed. If you think you're going to get your spiritual sustenance from 2 hours at church on Sunday, no, that's not what it's for. It's for you to go take the sacrament, and then for each of us to look for ways to help people around us. And if we go to church with that frame of mind, I'm here to take the sacrament, renew my commitments to Christ, and then I'm looking for ways to help other people. You do that, it's a different experience. It's a cooler experience. You're sitting there asking the Lord, who can I help? How can I help them? It's a different experience. Last thing, read everything you can about what's going on with scholarship in the Book of Mormon. But most people aren't aware of this. Get on the Maxwell Institute's website, look at the stuff that's happening, because I'm telling you, the last 20, 30 years or so, there has been a sea change in terms of the scholarship about the Book of Mormon. Are there anachronisms in the Book of Mormon? Of course there are. Yeah, Joseph Smith was living in the 19th century. Yeah, you're going to hear some of his language and some of his thought, but no. The scholarship on the Book of Mormon shows us this is an ancient book written by multiple authors that is complex and profound at ways that you don't get by just a surface read or by just living on the Book of Mormon videos. No. And so go to the Maxwell Institute, look at the stuff that they've got there and study it. And when we do that, you come away with okay, this book could not have come from Joseph Smith. It did. No, that's crazy. Where did it come from? That's when it gets interesting. And I believe the most elegant answer is the one Joseph Smith gave. It came from an angel on golden plates, was translated miraculously. That's crazy stuff, right? Happens to be true. And when we realize that's true, it invites us into a world of angels and spirit, of a world beyond what we can see, touch, feel, and measure. And that changes everything. One recommendation, get Grant Hardy's book, published by Oxford University Press, called Understanding the Book of Mormon. Best single volume about the Book of Mormon that you can get. Grant Hardy's a comparative literature guy, trained at Yale, teaches at UNC, and he's taken his scholarship and how to engage in a close read of the text and applied it to the Book of Mormon. The Book of Mormon is so much cooler than you and I think, and that the videos show, and that seminary teaches. Anyway, I got to run.
You're the man, Brother Griffith. Thank you so much. I respect you a lot. I admired you from a distance, and so glad to have the chance to actually get to visit with you. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Wish I had more time. See ya.
Oh, man. Wow, that was cool.
That was cool.
The legend himself.
I know. His picture made him seem a lot more intimidating. Once we started, I was like, oh yeah, this guy's cool.
He's a baller. He's a bit of a master orator. He's really good
Oh,
at
yeah.
storytelling.
Yeah, for real.
I mean, the fact that he was in South Africa during apartheid time and everything that you would see and kind of, I mean, so what is interesting about this discussion, right, is less than the other ones that I've had, where those ones have a lot been like, this is what the mission has done for me, blah, 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 which is,
Right.
true. This one is a lot more him talking about stories on his mission, and you can see the value that he places on his mission, but he doesn't so much have to explicitly say, I found my mission to be very valuable. It's just kind of like, you can just tell that he's kind of soaked it up and it
Yeah.
has kind of permeated every aspect of everything he does, right?
hmm And then listeners can, like you said, hear the stories and pick up, oh, wow, this is clearly like a valuable thing to this man.
Had you heard that Rexley story before? Had you heard him
I hadn't heard
obviously
any of
not,
those
right?
stories. Yeah, no, honestly, I was like taking like mental notes. And I'm like, that's a good, because I just had a pretty big, I filed a motion for summary judgment, which is basically just like an early stage to be like, Your Honor, we think all the evidence that has been supported right now, we think that we can win right now on the merits. Like, we don't even need to go to trial. And it was like a pretty big motion, obviously, because it's like a final order. If he grants my motion, like, we win the case. But anyway, I definitely struggled in aspects. There were parts where I was stammering, like he said, where I got nervous and I got thrown off by, he asked me like a question. Then I tried to remember where I was in my argument and I was like stuttering through to get back into the flow. Anyway, I just felt like that was the same message I had from that experience that he had of just dumb it down. Because part of you is like, these are attorneys and you want to sound smart and intelligent. When in reality, like they don't have, like you said, they don't have the time to like read up on everything that you write. And so really just make it as simple for them as possible. So anyway, just when he was saying that, I was like, man, I need to hear that and take notes. And that's something I need to implement. So anyway, it was helpful for me and selfishly too. I appreciated it.
Yeah, this will be the last thing and I'll let you jump off. But one thing that I really respect about, I mean, the amount of learning and reading and knowledge gathering that he's done over the course of his life
Yeah.
is probably 10 times more than you and I have done combined, right?
Yeah.
He's read everything. And I love that there's a marriage between, and that's what the intent of this podcast is supposed to be, right? Is that the spiritual aspect of a mission is, and church membership, everything is obviously crucial, but there's real marriage between the spiritual side of things and the secular side of things. And so I like that his advice to a returned missionary struggling with their own testimony isn't just, I mean, there's spiritual parts of it, like, yeah, pray and focus on sacrament and stuff, very important. But I love that there's a secular side of it, which is like, dig into some scholarship on it. The two really do go hand in hand. And I felt some very spiritual experiences in my own study by reading secular books, right? There's a book called
Right.
After. Talks about a guy studied near-death experiences, but did it from a very empirical perspective, where it's like he measured, what percent of near-death experiences had this element and that element. And it's not meant to be a spiritual book at all, but with the knowledge and the secular side of it, and you combine it with what you already know, then it becomes a really profound experience, right? So I love that that's part of his persona and part of his belief is really including the secular side of all things. Study, knowledge gathering of any kind. Truth is truth wherever you find it. So
Yeah. And also I felt like he took a secular way, like, having that different perspective, like you talked about going to church and having like a different perspective, right? That technically isn't like a spiritual principle. That is like a psychological principle of saying,
right.
I'm going to come with a different perspective here. It doesn't mean the church is less true or more true because I take that perspective, but maybe I get something different out of it. And that's just a secular practice because it's like, I think of like Viktor Frankl's, Man's Search for Meaning. That's kind of what he's teaching is like, yeah, I'm going through this terrible, horrible stuff, but I'm going to shift my perspective and focus on something else. And so again, I agree that I like that he put in like secular things too, where it's like, hey, go to church and you're going to get more out of it. Not because it's more true or less true or anything spiritually necessarily, but you're now coming at it of like a goal to serve others and you're going to get something completely different. And so I just like that like you said, he's also implementing like these, kind of secular, non-religious. And I think that, at least my understanding from what I've listened to your podcast and whatnot, that's kind of what you're trying to get at, is like more of that kind of secular crossover and whatnot.
For sure.
But
I mean, the
anyway,
spiritual side follows, right? It all follows, but
exactly.
you can't really disentangle them, but I think you can look at them separately. So it's cool. But anyway, man, thank you for your time. We'll let you get back to it. But
Yeah,
wow, what a cool
yeah.
experience, huh?
It was. Again, yeah, it was a great experience. I really like, even us just talking now, I just would love to have more time with him. Like you said, so much knowledge there. You really wish you could just sit and just kind of like, whatever the scriptures, sit at the feet. How beautiful are the feet, or whatever.
He'd
But
probably shake his head at that, but I agree with you.
for real. But anyway, it's good to see you, man. Let's catch up.
Okay, that's it for the pod. Thanks to Brother Tom Griffith for coming on today and sharing his experiences. Thanks to Nick for coming on to co-host. Thanks to Jake for producing the podcast. And thanks to all listeners for tuning in. Stick around. We'll be back for more episodes later. Thanks.